It was a warm July afternoon in 1944, and inside a wooden barracks near Rassenberg, East Prussia, a briefcase ticked softly beneath a heavy oak table. Around that table sat the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. Generals, officers, and, at the head, Adolf Hitler himself. At precisely 12:42 p.m., the world came within seconds of changing forever. When the explosion ripped through the wolf's lair, dust and smoke filled the air. Bodies were thrown, windows shattered, and chaos reigned. For one blinding moment, it seemed that history itself had been rewritten, that tyranny had finally been struck down by the hands of those inside its own empire. But when the smoke cleared, Hitler was still alive. This is the story of the men who dared to kill their Führer, of conscience versus obedience, of courage born from despair. This is Operation Valkyrie. Act I, Shadows in the Fatherland. By 1943, Germany was bleeding. The tide of war had turned. The Stalingrad catastrophe had shattered the illusion of invincibility, and Allied bombers now darkened German skies. In cities like Hamburg and Dresden, civilians cowered as firestorms consumed entire blocks. The promises of glory had turned to ash. Among the officers of the Wehrmacht, doubt grew quietly, like a secret infection. Not all of them had joined the Nazi Party. Many were career soldiers, loyal to Germany but repulsed by what the regime had become. Mass executions in the East, the slaughter of Jews, the destruction of moral law. For men like Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg, duty no longer meant blind obedience. It meant saving his country from itself. Stauffenberg was a decorated officer, handsome, brilliant, and fiercely patriotic. In North Africa, he had been gravely wounded, losing an eye, a hand, and 2 fingers. Yet his resolve only hardened. As he recovered in a Munich hospital, he read the reports from the Eastern Front, the atrocities, the hopelessness, and made his decision. A man must put an end to this madness, even if it costs him his life. Act 2, The Circle of Conspirators. By late 1943, a small but determined resistance had formed within the German High Command. They met in whispered gatherings. Officers, diplomats, even priests. Their goal: assassinate Hitler and negotiate peace with the Allies before Germany was completely destroyed. The group included General Ludwig Beck, once Chief of the General Staff, Colonel General Friedrich Albrecht, Major General Henning von Treschow, and others. Each of them knew the penalty for treason: hanging by piano wire at Plötzensee prison. Yet they pressed on. Their plan was twofold: kill Hitler, use a reserve army operation codenamed Valkyrie to seize control of Berlin, arrest the SS, and install a new government. Originally designed by Hitler himself, Valkyrie was a contingency plan for suppressing internal uprisings. The conspirators would twist it, claiming that the SS had staged a coup and that loyal army units must take control in Hitler's name. Except this time, Hitler would be dead. Stauffenberg, now Chief of Staff of the Reserve Army, had direct access to both the plan and the dictator. He was the perfect assassin. Act 3, Fire in the Wolf's Lair. It was July 20th, 1944. Stauffenberg flew to the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's heavily guarded headquarters in East Prussia, carrying a briefcase packed with explosives. Inside were British-made plastic bombs with timed pencil detonators, smuggled in through a daring network of conspirators. Before the meeting began, Stauffenberg entered a side room with his aide, Werner von Haeften. With only 3 fingers, he struggled to arm the bomb, crushing the detonator tube to start the chemical timer. He could arm only one of the 2 charges before being called into the meeting. The device ticked silently. At 12:30 p.m., Stauffenberg placed the briefcase near Hitler's feet, beside a thick oak table leg. Moments later, he excused himself, pretending to take a phone call. He walked briskly toward his car, heart pounding. At 12:42, the bomb exploded. The conference hut disintegrated in a blast of fire and splinters. Guards screamed. Flames licked the air. 4 men were killed instantly and dozens wounded. Stauffenberg saw the rising smoke and believed it had worked. He raced to the airfield, convinced Hitler was dead, and flew back to Berlin to trigger Operation Valkyrie. Act 4, The Coup That Never Was. At Army headquarters in Berlin, confusion reigned. Reports were contradictory. Some said Hitler was dead. Others that he was alive and furious. Albrecht and General Beck hesitated. Hours passed. Every minute mattered. Stauffenberg landed around 3 p.m., insisting the Führer was dead. He ordered Valkyrie into action. Telegrams were sent across Germany. The Führer is dead. The SS is attempting to seize control. All loyal units must restore order. For a brief, flickering moment it worked. In Paris, Prague, Vienna, reserve army officers arrested SS men and secured government buildings. The coup had begun. But then, the radio crackled with Hitler's voice. Alive, defiant, calling the conspirators traitors. Everything collapsed. Loyal officers reversed their orders. The SS stormed Berlin's Bendlerblock, the conspirators' headquarters. At 12:30 a.m., July 21st, the resistance was crushed. Stauffenberg, Albrecht, Haeften, and General Friedrich from, the very man who had hesitated to join them, stood in the courtyard. From, trying to save himself, ordered their immediate execution. Stauffenberg's final words before the bullet struck were clear and calm. Long live our sacred Germany. Act V, The Reckoning. In the following days, the Gestapo unleashed a wave of terror. More than 7,000 were arrested. Nearly 5,000 executed. General Beck took his own life. Henning von Treschow, who had once said, "The whole world will know that not all Germans were like Hitler," blew himself up on the Eastern Front when he heard the plot had failed. At Plötzensee prison, conspirators were hung on piano wires, filmed for Hitler's amusement. Their families were imprisoned, their names erased from history, at least that was the intent. But history remembered them. Act 6, The Legacy. 9 months later, Germany lay in ruins. Berlin burned. Hitler was dead, by his own hand this time. The men of Valkyrie had failed in their mission, but not in their purpose. In a time when obedience was worshipped, they chose defiance. When silence was safety, they chose to speak. And when loyalty meant complicity, they chose honor instead. The world would one day recognize them not as traitors, but as patriots who tried to save their country from madness. In post-war Germany, Stauffenberg became a symbol of moral courage, of conscience. Every July 20th, candles now burn where the shots once echoed in that courtyard, and the words of Treschow still linger in the air, as both an accusation and a hope. When, in a few hours, I go before God to give account of my actions, I know I will answer for what I did, not for what I failed to do. Epilogue. a briefcase that shook the world. The bomb in that wooden room failed to kill Hitler, but it killed the illusion of unity. It showed the world and future generations that even within one of history's darkest regimes, there were men who saw evil and tried to stop it. Operation Valkyrie was not just a failed coup. It was a final cry of conscience from the heart of a collapsing empire. A reminder that morality can survive even inside the machinery of tyranny. And though their plan failed, their defiance echoed longer than the Reich itself.